While trying on wedding dresses, my professor boyfriend suddenly received a text message. It was a video sent by his childhood friend. In the video, she was sitting on a hospital bed holding a baby, clutching a DNA report. My boyfriend dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. Half an hour later, he posted on social media, "After 10 years of twists and turns, the child is still yours to give." Then, he sent me a text message explaining, "That night, I thought it was you. I didn't expect it to be her. Sarah is soft-hearted and didn't want to tell me initially, but now that I know, I can't let her face this alone. She's smarter than you, and the baby is definitely more brilliant. We can't abandon a genius baby. You always said you didn't care about formalities, so how about we postpone the wedding? After she's recovering after giving birth, I'll marry you, and the baby will have your last name." Looking at the intimate scene in the social media post, I let out a cold laugh. As a major investor in the research institute, he actually wanted me to be a nanny for his genius baby? Turning around, I contacted the archenemy at the neighboring research institute, specifically Westbrook Research Labs. "Didn't you always need a partner?" I walked into the hospital room, and the air was full of laughter. Sarah was holding the newborn baby, a gentle smile on her face. Colleagues were gathered around the bed, some bringing flowers, some handing over cash gifts. "Congratulations! The baby is so cute, definitely a genius baby in the future. Sarah, you and Professor David finally have a result. I'm so happy for you." I stood by the door, but no one noticed me. David leaned by the window, gazing at Sarah with doting affection. When he saw me, a flicker of guilt crossed his eyes. But he quickly regained that familiar confidence. David walked towards me, a slight smile on his lips. "Julia, you came too? Come see the baby, he looks a lot like me." His casual tone made me want to laugh. I almost forgot I was David's fiancée. Sarah blinked, speaking softly, "Dr. Julia, thank you for coming to see me. Everyone says you're generous and wouldn't hold it against me." A colleague quietly chimed in, "That's right, babies are innocent. Professor David is so brilliant, he should definitely have more children with such excellent genes." I gave them a faint glance, saying nothing. The room was filled with warmth and harmony, and I was the only outsider. David stood in the center of the crowd, his eyes full of certainty and superiority. Sarah suddenly said, "David, I want to talk to Dr. Julia alone." Hearing this, David led the colleagues into the hallway. Sarah spoke softly, a glint of triumph in her eyes, "Dr. Julia, after all, this child will live with you in the future. I'll make sure he learns a lot from you." I looked at her, my tone neither warm nor cold. "Learn what? How to act spoiled or how to steal someone else's boyfriend?" Her face showed hurt. "Dr. Julia, please don't misunderstand, I didn't do it on purpose. That night, it was really just an accident." I didn't want to argue with her and was about to leave. But she suddenly grabbed my hand and pressed it against her abdomen. "Ah!" Sarah suddenly shrieked, "It hurts, my incision feels like it's splitting open." The room instantly fell silent, and everyone looked over. Sarah frowned, her eyes tearful as she looked at me. "Dr. Julia, are you still angry? I know I'm sorry about this, you can do anything to me and it wouldn't be too much." The more she spoke, the more pathetic she sounded, as if she had suffered the greatest injustice. David rushed over and pushed me away, his voice filled with anger. "Julia, what are you doing? Sarah is still recovering after giving birth." The colleagues also crowded around, some accusing, some trying to persuade me. "Julia, we're all colleagues, don't take your anger out on a woman who just gave birth. That's right, Sarah is just a young woman, give her a break." Chapter 2. David's face was cold, blocking Sarah as if protecting something precious. "Julia, I really didn't expect you to be like this." His voice was frigid. "If you're angry, take it out on me, don't hurt Sarah. She just had a baby, can't you be more generous?" I looked at him, saying nothing. But he seemed convinced I was in the wrong and continued to lecture. "I always thought you were reasonable, but I didn't expect you to be so petty. I'm making a note of what happened today. You should leave now, don't make things harder for Sarah." The surrounding colleagues also gave me strange looks. Sarah weakly tugged at David's sleeve. Dr. Julia might just be too sad, don't blame her. I sneered inwardly, explaining nothing, and simply turned to leave. Walking out of the hospital, the night wind hit me. I pulled my jacket tighter, feeling no warmth inside. Looking at the lights outside the window, my thoughts drifted back to the past. Years ago, David and I were PhD students together and joined the Northwood Research Institute together. We were standouts in their graduating class, partners in the lab. He pursued me very actively, bringing me breakfast and helping with experiments in various ways every day. Everyone envied us. Later, we followed the usual path towards marriage. But a year ago, David suddenly proposed to make an exception to admit a graduate student. He explained that Sarah was one of his grad students from university, that her family was poor and he wanted to give her a chance. And he had known her since she was young, treating her like a younger sister. But ever since Sarah arrived, David grew more distant from me. The two of them always traveled together for conferences and worked on projects. That time I couldn't make it to a GA. Daring, he didn't come home all night. The next day, he reeked of alcohol and just said he was seeing a colleague home. I believed him. It wasn't until today that I learned he had slept with Sarah that night. And he had hidden it from me for a whole year. The car stopped at the apartment building entrance, and I got out, feeling a heavy stone in my chest. My text message chimed with a series of notifications. It was the wedding photo proofs. I opened the photos and saw myself smiling happily. But the person beside me could no longer spark any anticipation in me. I forwarded the proofs to David, along with a single sentence, "Let's break up." Soon after, he called, his voice full of disbelief, "Julia, stop messing around. We've already taken our wedding photo proofs." I said coldly, "There's no need anymore." Suddenly, the sound of a baby crying came from the other end of the phone call. He quickly cooed, "Shoo, don't cry, Sarah, no. Julia, don't overthink things, you've always been the one I love most. Sarah, just wait a few more days for me. After she's recovering after giving birth, we'll register our marriage." Suddenly, embarrassing sounds came from the other end of the phone call. I felt nothing but irony. He was cheating on me even while talking to me, and he didn't even realize he had just called me by the wrong name. Chapter 3. I couldn't listen anymore, so I gave a perfunctory reply and hung up. The house was terrifyingly silent. I sat for a while, then got up and started packing. First, I threw all of David's clothes and shoes into a suitcase. His toothbrush and toothpaste, face wash, razor, all went straight into the trash can. I didn't want to see anything that belonged to him anymore. I went into the study, intending to clear out the cabinet. Halfway through tidying, the dusty box on the top shelf of the bookshelf caught my eye. David always liked collecting strange things, and he never let me touch this box. I brought it down and opened it. Inside the box was a thick stack of envelopes. All in Sarah's handwriting, the letter paper inside addressed "My dearest David," each letter mushy. As I flipped through the letters and saw David's replies, my fingers trembled slightly. I was stunned. The timeline of these letters almost completely overlapped with the time we were together. The earliest one was even postmarked shortly after we officially started dating. They wrote about mundane things, feelings, and future plans. The letters also discussed going abroad to work on a research project together, saying, "Once Sarah graduates, I'll take you to see the northern lights in Scandinavia," and at the end, she drew a little sun. I had always thought David cheated on me a year ago. It never occurred to me that they had been secretly maintained this literary correspondence all along. I gave a bitter laugh, put the letters back in the box, and threw it onto the pile of luggage by the door. My eyes welled up a little. I tilted my head back, trying hard to wipe away the tears. When I was finishing the last bag of trash, my phone call rang. David's tone was light. "Summer, come to the Northwood Research Institute early tomorrow. I have a surprise for you, something that will definitely make you happy." I held the phone call, said nothing, just hummed in response. On the other end, he continued to talk to himself. "You've been throwing tantrums lately, I know you feel wronged. Let's talk about it when we meet tomorrow, okay?" Looking at the room, which was already half empty, I said, "Okay." It would be our last meeting. The next morning, I went to the Northwood Research Institute. As soon as I entered the lobby, there were festive streamers strung across the entrance. A banner read, "Welcome Baby Party," with adoption ceremony specifically added. Cake and flowers fill. The Northwood Research Institute. Colleagues had already arrived, gathered in a lively crowd, like they were attending a grand celebration. David stood in the center, dressed in a sharp suit, looking pleased. When he saw me, he immediately waved, his face full of confidence. "Summer, you're here? Today isn't just the baby's welcome baby party, it's also the adoption ceremony we specially prepared for you. From now on, the child is ours." I almost burst out laughing. An adoption ceremony? What a bizarre surprise. What did David think I was? A free nanny to raise his illegitimate child? Had his brain been infected by the bacteria in the lab to think this was a happy family? I ignored him and walked straight to the table, where I suddenly noticed a familiar petri dish among the various items for the baby to play with. It still had an experiment number sticker, and there were water stains on the dish. It was the experimental material I had just finished working on 2 days ago. I frowned. That was my research. How could David just casually throw a petri dish out as a toy? Sarah held the baby, smiling gently and sweetly. She deliberately pushed the baby's hand into my petri dish, as if showing off. My heart suddenly went cold, even knowing that the bacterial culture in the petri dish was contaminated. But I couldn't help but hurry over, reaching out to take it back. Just then, Sarah suddenly shrieked, "Oh no!" She fell backward, and the baby in her arms also fell to the ground. The entire lobby instantly went silent. Sarah held the baby, crying out, "My baby!" Tears streamed down her face. Sarah choked out her accusation, "Dr. Julia, how could you push my child?" Chapter 4. The scene was chaotic, and a group of people rushed forward to help pick up the baby. But I picked up the petri dish from the ground. Sarah picked up the baby, who had a bloody scratch on his forehead. It wasn't a major injury, but she kept wiping at it, smearing blood all over the baby's face. It looked horrifying. She shielded the baby while sobbing and looking at me. "Dr. Julia, are you still mad at me? If you're angry, you can take it out on me. The baby doesn't understand anything." Her voice was soft and weak, making everyone around frown. "Julia, you're too much." David's face was dark, standing in front of Sarah. "It's just a petri dish. Is it more important than the child? How can I trust you to raise the baby when you can't prioritize things like this?" "You must apologize to Sarah." I retorted directly. "I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I apologize?" "David, get it straight. My experimental petri dish isn't a toy. How dare you take it out for the baby to reach for items? Do you know there are unprocessed experimental bacteria in there?" David frowned, changing the subject. "In your heart, there's only your research, not me at all. It's precisely because I value today's adoption ceremony that I used something most precious to you for the reach for items." This time, I really laughed. "You want to be generous, so why didn't you use your own experimental bacteria to play around? Was it you or Sarah who was behind this, deliberately targeting me?" Sarah wiped her tears, continuing to play the victim. "Dr. Julia, I never meant to target you. This child will have to be raised by you eventually. But you're so hostile towards him, I'm very scared." Hearing this, David became more confident. "Julia, you weren't like this before, you feel like a stranger to me. You've changed." I spoke bluntly. "David, whether I've changed or not, don't you know? You cheated on me, and now you want me to be a stepmother to your child? Why should I tolerate it?" David laughed in anger, his tone sarcastic. "Julia, you just think too highly of yourself. All you know is how to do experiments, you'll never know how to love someone." I shrug. Saying word by word, "That's right, my research is more important than you. David, I've long stopped wanting to tolerate this. Let's break up." David said, "Okay, then let's break up." The scene fell silent. I turned and left without looking back. Sarah held the baby and cried even harder, saying the baby was scared by me and his face had turned pale. David immediately panicked and rushed them both to the hospital. I stayed in the lab, cleaning up the mess. The petri dish was shattered on the floor, and a lot of experimental data was ruined. While handling the hazardous waste, I rearranged the documents that had been disturbed. At night, I was the only one left in the office. No one asked if I was tired, no one cared if I was disappointed. These past few days, David had been with Sarah, even renting her an apartment in an upscale apartment complex. His social media posts were full of updates showing off the baby and the other woman. Some colleagues even sent news that he had deliberately changed the first author's name to Sarah on a new paper. Looking at that paper, with my name conspicuously missing from the author list, I found it ridiculous. All that time spent on experiments, only to end up with nothing. David gave me some space, perhaps thinking it was time to coax me. He called an intern and asked them to order flowers to apologize to me. The intern was surprised. "Professor David, didn't you know? Dr. Julia resigned ages ago." Chapter 5. David was stunned when he heard I had resigned. He didn't believe it, thinking it was just a petty tantrum. He even suspected the grad student was in cahoots with me, putting on an act. He continued to spend time with Sarah as usual, appearing in her social media post every day, helping buy formula, changing diapers for the baby, as if nothing had changed. But gradually, he noticed my voice was missing from his life. No one organized his documents for meetings, and no one helped him salvage things immediately when problems arose. He picked up his phone call and tried calling and texting me repeatedly, but all he saw was "You have been blocked by this user." David started to panic. He rushed back to the Northwood Research Institute, wanting to ask if I was just being difficult. But as soon as he entered his office, he found 2 large suitcases piled by the door, filled entirely with his own things. He opened the door to my office and found that all my belongings were gone, leaving only a resignation letter lying quietly on the desk. He held the resignation letter, finally feeling uneasy. David wasn't giving up. He went straight to my apartment building. He knocked on the door for a long time before the landlord informed him the apartment building had been rented out long ago and the new tenant had changed the lock. He was at a loss, standing in the hallway for a long time. He had thought my breakup was just angry words, and that I would come back with just a little coaxing from him. His phone call kept dialing, the screen always showing no response. David's world became completely silent for the first time. Since I left, David's life completely collapsed. He spent all day holed up in his office, the ashtray overflowing with cigarette butts. The table was covered with spread out documents and unapproved files. His text message had no new messages, and his phone call was so quiet it was maddening. Sarah came in with an insulated container, gently serving him food while saying softly, "David, is Dr. Julia jealous of me and the baby? Don't blame her, she just cares about you too much." David frowned, interrupting her irritably, "Stop talking, this has nothing to do with you." Sarah paused slightly, then lowered her head, "But the baby has been crying a lot lately. I'm really afraid Dr. Julia will come back and make trouble for us." David had no patience. "Oh, listen anymore," and waved her away. "Go back first, I don't want to hear anything right now." Seeing David's sudden change in attitude, Sarah could only leave feeling wronged. The office returned to silence, and David sat at his desk in a daze. His mind was full of memories of me. We stayed up all night writing papers together, went out for dinner/meal after work, drank the first cup of coffee in the fall together. He suddenly felt that all the warmth in these years was brought by me. If it weren't for that accidental night, he and I would have married long ago. But now, everything was irreversible. He opened our chat history. Each message felt like a knife in his heart. Sarah often used the baby to pressure David to come home. It worked once or twice, but eventually, one day he exploded. He had thought that with Sarah and the baby by his side, everything could fill the void left by me. But reality quickly brought him clarity. Sarah revolved around him every day. When the baby cried, she immediately asked for help. When the kitchen pipe broke, she needed David to fix it. Even simple files required his personal attention. Her dependence and helplessness might have softened hearts at first. But over time, David only felt exhausted. When he was home, the baby cried incessantly, formula spilled everywhere. Sarah would only stand by the door and cry. David was extremely frustrated, slammed the bedroom door shut, and stood on the balcony smoking. Under the night sky, his silhouette was lonely. He thought back to me. Julia did everything efficiently and decisively. Experiments, life, emotions, she never pushed her burdens onto others. No matter how difficult things were, she carried them herself. David suddenly understood that what truly captivated him was never Sarah's fragility, but Julia's inherent independence and clarity. He stood on the balcony for a long time, his regret growing heavy. In his heart. Sarah ran over and started crying again, tugging at his sleeve and saying tearfully, "David, do you dislike me now? Do you think I can't compare to Dr. Julia?" David looked at her tear-streaked face, his voice low, "I will be responsible for you and the baby's lives. But between us, this is as far as it goes." Sarah froze, speechless for a long time. David stayed awake all night. The next morning, he packed his belongings and moved out of Sarah's place. As he closed the door behind him, he actually felt a sense of relief. He drove around the city, thinking about the life we had shared, feeling deep regret and unwillingness. Even though everything was irreversible now, he finally understood that the only person he truly loved was Julia. David leaned in his car, his gaze deep. He wouldn't give up on finding Summer. Chapter 6. While David was back home replaying the past over and over, I was already sitting in a lecture hall overseas. The foreign air carried a dry chill, and the sun shone through the tall windows. I had just arrived abroad and was immediately invited to an international conference. The venue was crowded. I sat among the people. I didn't expect to see Alexander there. It was a coincidence. He was from the same university and same year as me, and I knew him from undergraduate to graduate school. He had always been the center of attention, winning awards in competitions, giving academic lectures. He could always easily become the focus of others. But our research directions were different, so we never had close interactions. After graduation, we went our separate ways. Occasionally, I heard news about him, mostly from David. A playboy rich kid who relied on his family to get ahead, low-quality papers, a playboy rich kid. These were David's evaluations of him. It wasn't until this day that I finally saw him give a speech on stage for the first time. Alexander wore a S.I. ample shirt, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His logic was clear, his explanation engaging, and during the QA session, he was surrounded by professors asking questions, but he handled it all calmly and confidently, his eyes showing certainty and ease. As the applause subsided, he nodded politely to everyone as he came down the stage. It was only when he reached me that he stopped, a hint of hesitation in the smile on his lips. "Julia, long time no see." His tone sounded like an old friend reuniting after a long absence. I returned his smile politely. He casually asked, "Didn't our great Professor David attend?" I replied lightly, "He's probably busy, recovering after giving birth with the baby's mother lately." Alexander froze for a moment, a slight flicker of surprise in his eyes. He nodded, said no more, just looked at me with a meaningful gaze for a long time. He paused, then his tone became serious. "Our Westbrook Research Labs happens to be looking for a project leader lately. Would you be interested in considering it? The compensation is very generous, and you can pursue any direction you want. Or you could be a partner." His words amused me. "Alexander, you're so direct. Aren't you afraid I'll mess up your Westbrook Research Labs?" He shrugged slightly. "If you come, the Westbrook Research Labs will definitely only get better." I didn't agree immediately, just said, "I'll think about it." Alexander wasn't in a hurry at all, smiling, "You're welcome anytime. Call me when you've made up your mind." We talked for a while, and Alexander didn't ask any more about my private life. It felt comfortable being around him. That evening, back at my place, I scrolled through social media and saw the buzz back home. Photos of the Northwood Research Institute group photo, Sarah and David holding the baby, and her caption, "Thank you Professor David for always being there for me, the future is promising." What surprised me even more was that the research project David and I had been working on was given to Sarah. My position had been replaced by Sarah. Staring at the phone screen, I felt no anger, just a complete sense of hopelessness. I opened Alexander's text message and sent a simple message: "If your offer is still valid, I'd like to join." Alexander replied instantly: "Welcome, Julia." Chapter 7. David had been like a man possessed lately, searching for me every day. He kept sending messages, making phone calls, and even hired a detective to find my whereabouts. But I remained out of reach. His career also started to fall apart. The major investor in the research institute suddenly withdrew their funding, and the accounts became tight overnight. The project stalled, nearly $10 million had already been invested, and funding was about to run out. David sat in his office, staring at the final ultimatum. The investor had been clear: if he couldn't produce new results this month, he would be dismissed. He was panicking, but he had no idea that I had orchestrated all of this myself. David had always believed that the investment company behind him was an established pharmaceutical giant, with deep pockets, and wouldn't withdraw funding easily. But he never dreamed that I was actually the heir to this pharmaceutical company. I just hadn't revealed my identity all these years. Before, I silently supported his projects and never questioned how he spent the money. But now, I had lost the last bit of patience. Members of the project team were also talking among themselves, saying that David hadn't really done much research all these years, just made the employees work overtime to rush data, while he himself used connections to get ahead and earned a high salary. Several interns complained about not getting paid for overtime, and team members were all looking for opportunities to jump ship. David was pacing frantically. But he was helpless. His former confidence and superiority were completely gone, and he just walked around the Northwood Research Institute with a dark face every day. At night, he would still sit in the lab in a daze, wondering if I would suddenly appear and help him salvage things, like I used to. But now, no one was helping him anymore. The atmosphere at the Northwood Research Institute grew increasingly stifling. David finally began to understand that without me, he was nothing. Just as everything was going downhill, news of David's academic misconduct suddenly broke online. Someone anonymously reported that he had fabricated data and that his experimental results could not be replicated. Soon, the netizens exploded, with all sorts of revelations and negative information pouring out. Someone dug up his mediocre college grades, claiming he got into the Northwood Research Institute through family connections, and others questioned if he was just a relation-based hire with no real ability. His account on the academic forum was exposed, and all the boastful posts he had made in the past became a laughingstock. Online discussions were rampant, and some even doxed his university and Northwood Research Institute advisors, questioning how they could have mentored such a student. But the storm was far from over. As the investigation deepened, Sarah was also implicated. Someone discovered discrepancies in her academic qualifications. Her master's thesis was allegedly borrowed from the Northwood Research Institute. The paper had an extremely high plagiarism rate, with content that was almost identical. Netizens immediately followed the trail, uncovering how Sarah, while claiming to work hard, had been playing the emotional card around David, being granted special admissions and being praised to the skies. Her social media comments section was completely overwhelmed, with waves of questioning reaching a crescendo. In her precarious situation, Sarah panicked. She started crying and complaining everywhere, even posting videos online, directly accusing David of exploited her. She cried and said, "I'm just a helpless girl. Professor David used his position to force me to help him create fake data, and he threatened to ruin my future if I told anyone." This shifted all the criticism back towards David. Colleagues were afraid for themselves. No one dared to go near David and Sarah anymore. Their former glory turned into a laughingstock in an instant. Chapter 8. While the turmoil was raging back home, Alexander and I were quietly conducting research at a university lab overseas. Away from the disputes and rumors, life suddenly became very pure. Alexander was a man who knew how to take care of people. He always seemed to remember what kind of coffee I liked. During lunch breaks, he would hand me a warm cappuccino. Sometimes he would casually bring up things from university, remembering everything clearly, including the time my professor boyfriend cheated and had a child, how I then married a rising star in research, the competitions I participated in, and even the occasional complaints about the cafeteria food. I looked at him in surprise. "How do you remember all that?" He looked at me, the seriousness in his eyes captivating. "Julia, you were so radiant back then, everyone remembered you." At this moment, something soft quietly broke through in my heart. Unlike David's care, which carried a sense of superiority, Alexander always managed to disarm me with the most ordinary gestures. He loved sunlight and was willing to share half of his light with me. Over time, I found myself increasingly unable to be without his company. His presence became my daily routine, effortless and filled with small, unexpected moments that made my heart flutter. Days passed quietly like this. We spent every day together researching literature, doing experiments, eating, and working late, occasionally taking walks in the nearby park. He was very good with words and always made me laugh. Sometimes, when experiments weren't going well, a lighthearted joke from him could brighten my mood for the whole day. One day after finishing an experiment, I casually asked, "Alexander, did your family ever consider a marriage alliance for you?" Alexander looked at me deeply. "I already have someone I like. I won't enter a marriage alliance." "The daughter of Darué Pharmaceuticals, you wouldn't want her either?" He shook his head. "Of course not." Wait, as the future heir to Darué Pharmaceuticals, I smiled slightly at him. "Are you serious?" "Yes, if you don't want to, just pretend I didn't say anything." Alexander froze for a second, then as if afraid I would change my mind, he said, "Yes. I'd be thrilled." He was as happy as a child. The next day, he made an official announcement on social media, with a picture of our lab group photo and a caption with just 4 words, "Wish granted." Colleagues from the lab came to congratulate him. Someone teased Alexander, "You've liked her for so long, and finally made it happen." Alexander didn't shy away and openly admitted his long-standing crush. Alexander's parents had always been worried about their son's marriage. Approaching 30 without even a girlfriend, his parents had thought their son's sexual orientation might be different from others. Hearing that Alexander had found someone to marry, his parents were very agreeable to this marriage alliance. On the day of the engagement party, the hall was decorated luxuriously and lively, and Alexander wore a fitted custom suit, his handsome face beaming with joy. I wore a white silk dress, holding his hand. I was talking to a friend when I suddenly heard a commotion at the entrance. David had actually shown up at the banquet hall. His suit was slightly wrinkled, his expression haggard, standing outside the crowd, his gaze fixed on me and Alexander. The banquet hall instantly fell silent, everyone looking towards the entrance. Alexander and I exchanged a glance. He immediately tightened his grip on my hand and stood in front of me. David clenched his teeth, walking in step by step, his voice low, "Julia, you can't get engaged to him." Chapter 9. David's face was incredibly ugly, his eyes filled with unwillingness and disbelief. He stared intently at me, his voice trembling, "Summer, we've been together for so many years, can you really let go?" I looked at him calmly, my voice flat, "David, it's over between us. You have no right to say these things here, and you shouldn't disturb my life anymore." He lowered his head, his voice hoarse, "I know I was foolish before, I'm sorry. I've completely cut ties with Sarah. I swear I'll only be with you from now on. Let's start over, okay?" I wasn't moved, just felt a sense of calm inside. "Whatever happens between you and Sarah has nothing to do with me, you don't need to tell me." He looked up, his eyes slightly red, his voice low, "Summer, I really know I made a mistake. I've thought a lot these past few days. If it weren't for that night, we would have been married by now. You've always been the person I care about most." "David, stop talking. The day you cheated, our relationship ended." He wanted to step closer, but stopped himself. David cried in front of me for the first time, pleading, "Please give me another chance, okay? I can change anything, just come back." I just shook my head. David finally couldn't hold back, and tears streamed down his face. He stood there, as if all his strength had been drained. "Summer, are you really unwilling to come back?" I didn't reply, looking up at Alexander. Alexander put his arm around my shoulder, sneering, "Julia doesn't need to look back, because you're simply not worthy of her." David's eyes turned angry and hurt, pointing at Alexander and shouting angrily, "Don't think you're such a good person. You're clearly just a playboy rich kid, and you want to sweet talk and toy with Julia's feelings. Do you think you're worthy?" Alexander's expression was calm, his tone unwavering. At least I wouldn't lie to her, and I wouldn't waver in my feelings. You have no right to question me, let alone make a scene here. David's face turned bright red. He still wanted to step forward but was stopped by Alexander. Alexander waved to the security guard at the door, casually instructing, "Please escort this gentleman out, he is not my guest." The security guard quickly came over. David tried to struggle, but no one paid him any attention anymore. Alexander led me back to the guests. My heart had never felt so firm as it did now. Later, David pestered me for a while. He kept sending messages, calling, and even asking people to send me gifts frequently. But I never responded, always giving him a cold reaction when I saw him. He finally realized that he could never go back to the past in this lifetime and had no choice but to leave. Soon, the academic misconduct scandal involving David fully erupted. Both the university and the Northwood Research Institute began investigations. Ultimately, he was dismissed, and no one in academia dared to hire him anymore. When he applied for jobs, he was either rejected or immediately blocked. Having lost his position and reputation, he and Sarah had to hide in a rental apartment. Sarah's life was no better. Her academic qualifications were found to be fabricated, her master's degree revoked, and the university directly issued a dismissal. Her affair with a university professor was exposed, and social media and online forums were filled with comments cursing her. She had no income and had to start live streaming to support the child. But viewers only saw her as a joke. The comments were full of sarcasm and ridicule. Later, she fell for a live streaming agency scam and was defrauded of millions. David still couldn't let go of his pride at this time and refused to go home to ask his parents for help. His parents were also considered a middle-class family in the city, and seeing their son do something so embarrassing, they didn't want to deal with him either. David scraped by in the rental apartment by selling old items and collecting cardboard boxes. Eventually, he starved to death in the dim room because he had no money for food. When I heard this news from a friend, I merely sighed faintly and didn't pay any more attention. My life with Alexander, however, grew better and better. We held a wedding, and our family and friends were all very supportive. We continued to work hard side by side in the lab, achieved breakthroughs in our research, and won several major awards. In our free time, we traveled and vacationed together. I never looked back and lived the rest of my life in peace and happiness.